Okay.
Brilliant.
Well, thank you all for coming.
Oh. Can you hear him okay?
Dave's just going to get the DVD player, which Ben needs.
Yeah. Yep.
We're watching Lord of the Rings?
As soon as that's done, we'll figure it out. And it's all
The art and miniature.
Don't worry.
Oh, right, okay, I've heard about this.
Yeah.
I'll worry.
Okay. Thank you everyone for coming. We're going to do a little bit of a panel on miniature painting. We'll have a wee bit of a chat first of all, but there will be an opportunity for questions afterwards if you want to. If you have any burning questions to ask, then you'll be able to do so. But my name is Ben Porter. Some of you may know me by the moniker Ashenhold Art on the socials, and I'll be your host this evening. As far as housekeeping stuff, if there is a fire alarm tonight, there's not a drill planned, is there? Okay, if Terry doesn't know, there's probably not a drill planned. So it means that if an alarm does go off, it's real, and you'll be exiting to your left, my right, just here, nearest door to you. Other than that, I think we can... mobile phones. I understand that some of you maybe do need to take calls and things like that. That's fine. We just ask if you could keep them on silent or vibrate. And you just give them a wee check.
Good idea to check mine as well.
Yeah, because I was actually at a wedding recently where a lady's phone went off twice during the ceremony, and everyone talked about her through the meal. There's nothing like the fear of social rejection to motivate people. So.
I'm a professional, so it's
I
came prepared me.
I actually always keep mine on vibrate.
Steady on.
Steady on.
Yeah. Anyway, so I've introduced myself. So, gentleman to my immediate left here is Tommy Sewell.
Hi.
He is from Manchester. Some of you may know him by the moniker the Miniature Painting Tutor. He has a golden demon under his belt, amongst other accolades. And if you do want to really delve into the nuts and bolts of miniature painting, then he is your man.
Yay! Do you know what? The more important one, I think, is the book than the Golden Demon.
You do have a book, don't you?
The book than
Yes,
the Golden
which
Demon,
is,
yeah.
I believe, currently available, well, not currently, but tomorrow if you go down there. Warlord Games are selling that book. It is The Art of Tommy Sewell.
Nice to know they've got it.
Dave Taylor?
Yeah, Dave Taylor,
Dave
yeah.
Taylor, yep.
It was also another wonderful man on socials, by the way, if you don't
Yes.
already know Dave. Yeah, Dave's good.
Thank you, Daddy. That's all right.
In fact, he sells a load of books for what, 12, 15? 12.
There's a whole collection of them
Yeah.
for various
Yeah, I mean,
artists.
like a load of top
And,
artists.
yeah,
Like
very, very high quality books as well. I actually do. I have one. So yeah, there you
check
go.
that out. It's not meant to be an advert, by the way. That's not the point.
The Art and Miniature hardcover, and Tommy goes through a lot of his philosophy and his techniques in painting, and that is out now. So
The reason I pointed that out is because the demon or that, there's more of my heart and soul in that than there is in the demon, without a doubt.
the demon's impressive, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's all right. I didn't mean to get it. But that I meant to do. I meant to do that
it's
for
an
you
accolade,
guys.
right? But this is
Oh,
why
yeah,
I do the introduction, because you would skip stuff like that.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, and I'll waffle on.
Yeah, but there we go.
That's
But,
all right.
yeah, waffling. We also have with us Lisa Mason, known as Goldfinch Miniatures, and she is a phenomenal up-and-coming miniature painter. It was your most recent work. It was the Angel, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Which was it best in show?
No, that got bronze at Fen. Oh, it was my White Dragon that I got best in show at Salute last year.
That was
Yeah.
You got a
Oh,
bronze
do you know
for
what?
it?
Right, that caused so much controversy.
Did it?
Yeah. I held it on my hand, and that little thing just looked. That little thing looked like it could just jump off at you and just. It looked like it was already at its own scale. Do you know what I mean? It looked beautiful. It was fantastic. Lovely little slender arms on it. It was really nice. You know. So yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah, Lisa takes a a truly artistic approach to the craft. So if you want to see a bit more of the world of miniature painting beyond Warhammer, then I can't recommend Lisa's work enough. We'll hopefully get a wee bit more insight into your process later tonight as well. And then finally, from the Island of Fire, Mr. John Hart.
Hello, good evening.
Yes, who is a Games Workshop veteran. You spent many years developing the Spanish side of the business.
Indeed, yeah.
Also have a number of demons.
Two demons, yeah.
2 demons.
2 kids as well. More demons.
Which is which, yeah. Particularly proficient at freehand, you would say?
I would say
I would say.
Quite into my
I would
freehands,
say,
yeah. Quite enjoy doing a little bit of freehand and all aspects of miniature painting, and from competition painting down to just painting units of goblins. Why not? It's a lot of fun.
Brilliant. Yep. So introductions out of the way. I've got some questions for you, and then we'll throw it back to audience people. I'm sure you've got some questions as well. So happy? Get the ball rolling.
Yeah.
Please, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay.
Go for it.
Let's get
So
into it.
let's start things off nice and straightforward with how did you first become involved in miniature painting? And let's start with John for that one.
Okay, so I was very small, a wee lad, as you would probably say here, yeah. And my father was into making scale miniatures. He did model ships, he did the Cutty Sark and, super galleons with huge masts and sails and rigging. So he was doing that. Also, he did model railway, he did tank kits, Second World War tank kits and aeroplanes. So I grew up in a crazy house where he was steaming planks to stick on a boat and asking me to hold a handkerchief in some varnish so that it would then set as a sail, and helping him knot the rigging on boats and things like this. So I grew up around that. The place smelled of humbrol. He also had motorbikes, so he used to take motorbikes to pieces and leave them in the kitchen. Mum has a lot of patience, and so my father was into that, and I grew up doing that, and then I discovered White Dwarf magazine when I was about 10, so in 1985, 1986, and just fell in love with it. Started writing books and drawing pictures of griffins and unicorns and just writing down stuff about them. I was quite into the fighting fantasy novels as well, Ian Livingstone, Steve Jackson, so choose your own adventure. So I was really into fantasy right from an early age, and started painting miniatures. My friends at school, some of them had some miniatures, and they were awful looking. All the things I was doing were awful looking. I think my first miniature was an old Imperial Guardsman from Rogue Trader. It's like a one-piece miniature that I dipped in humbrol because my dad had painted the fence with it, and just dipped it. And I thought it looked great, and my mum said it was great, but everyone else it was awful. So from small beginnings, that's how I started, and it's just in my blood. I can't go too many days without doing something creative, whether it's painting a miniature, building something, or drawing a picture on a napkin, or doodling. This morning I was doodling Space Marines in the, Space Marines and goblins, just drawing a picture as we were having breakfast. It's kind of needs to come out. That's my shtick with miniatures and how I do it.
Brilliant. Same question to Lisa.
Kid of the 80s, I kind of grew up with all Labyrinth and Dark Crystal, all those kind of fantasy films, and I've always loved fantasy and science fiction. I kind of found Warhammer when I was about 12, and then just all the goblins and the elves and everything, and sort of like carried on painting till I was in my early 20s, I think. And obviously when the Games Workshop did the Lord of the Rings stuff, came out in the early millennium. I've got a load of that, still have some of it. And then abandoned it for 15 years because I found online gaming.
Lost.
Yes, lost. And then thankfully finally ditched that, and about 5.5 years ago found Warhammer again, and then realised that 3D printing is a thing. So the Warhammer got chucked out the window, not literally. But yeah, and ever since then it's kind of like, I paint a lot of resin miniatures and 3D prints, and I'm very fortunate that I've got very good friend who has a 3D printer, so he does things at cost for me, so much appreciated. That is where pretty much.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's like a whole generation of people that have gotten involved in the hobby, particularly when Games Workshop picked up The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of people I've spoken to that have.
Yeah, I mean, some of it is still, I still haven't finished any of it, but it's just like, I did end up selling some of it because I thought I'm never going to paint it, so someone else can enjoy having it, so,
Yeah.
but I mean, I've still kept some of it, but I just prefer, there's so much stuff out there, that you can, there's so many different companies making so many different resin miniatures, there's just so much choice, and that's the other thing is they call it the pile of shame, but I like calling it my little shop of joy because basically to open up a shop. So
you're allowed to be a collector as well.
Yeah.
I think that's it's important to emphasise
we won't talk
that.
about the amount of paints I've got.
And Tommy, how did you get involved?
Same as those guys.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean, to be honest, it might have been train sets instead of
Train sets.
balsa wood ships like John did. But yeah, train sets with my dad and Labyrinth, Dark Crystal, etc. But mainly, my mum took me past the Games Workshop one time, and cabinets full of models, and we wanted to go in. I wanted to go in, and she wanted to drag me on. But we ended up going in, and it kind of all escalated from there, essentially. 4th edition Fantasy and 2nd edition Space Marine, which is the Ultramarine cover box Space Marine, by the way.
Those are two very specific points that you remember.
Oh, yeah, big time. Absolutely. Fantasy for the actual 4th edition box, High Elves especially, and the stories that Bill King wrote throughout that High Elf army. But you know what I'm talking about. So the Epic box, though, Eldar, everything about Eldar and Eldar Titans and the shape of Eldar, very much appealed to me because I'm that kind of guy, or was then.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit different now. In that time, trying to emulate heavy metal artists, I got to sit and watch an heavy metal painter from that time paint a model from start to finish, and that's when painting took off properly for me.
Yeah.
Because I am very much a painter more than anything else, even though I do.
You've got quite a few armies.
Mad amounts of armies, but they're all based on narrative. Yeah. So he might have a question later on, by the way. I was trying not to answer it while he was here. Trying not to answer it while I was here early on. So, well, I kind of like.
The audience.
Do you know what? Do you know what the thing is? I've been around questions like these a lot in the last maybe 20 years, and.
But you've said questions like these. So what are they?
So in fact, the question Alex was posing to me, he was trying not to pose it to me, but I said to him, actually ask me this question. So as a display standard painter, or somebody who aspires to paint at a display standard, if any of you are those kind of guys, how then do you drop that desire for quality and get an army finished? Yeah, exactly. How do you do that? So the thing is, these two things play into each other. So you've got army painting, high frequency, low quality models, and display standard painting, which is low frequency, high standard models. This bottom one takes a lot of practice. Well, where can that practice happen? In high frequency. There. But what fuels you through that process? It's the theme of the army, the story you're trying to tell. So you could use an army or an entire project. So if you've been following me on Instagram in the last couple of years, you'll notice I've bashed out 3,000 points of Skaven, which is base coat, dry brush, wash. And then I ended with a paint job on a Clan Pestilence Plague Monk thing. And that took me, weeks? It took ages, didn't it? So, whatever amount of time it took, I was aiming at a standard. But all those ideas and all that theme and all those colour schemes and all that practice for getting the right quality of even just base coat is all built up throughout the army. Do you see what I mean? So what happens when you paint an army? Well, your skills improve because of repetition. Yeah, so what I mean by that is your skills can improve in the speed department. So let's say you take time on a display standard model, you base coat, base coat, base coat. Well, let's do that over an army. By the end of that army, it's going to be base coat, base coat, base coat to the same standard. Now you're a display standard painter with a speed attribute. Yeah, all of a sudden now it becomes an encouraging idea to paint an army. So let's say then you get to your army general after practicing all these skills. So as you go up through the ranks, you're going to go up through your quality. So you're going to start to improve your quality as well as speed, and those things will move together. So every highlight on your just bog standard dudes is going to be a whatever kind of highlight, right? Just speed for these ones. And then your higher rank models, well, let's just put a little bit more attention, maybe an extra highlight, but you've carried that speed with you. Well, now we're going to add speed and accuracy together. And you see how this idea is just going to start to build? Okay, let's put it all together and slow everything down. Well, because all that speed and accuracy and quality has become part of you over hundreds of models, well, you're now much more focused, not focused, free, because it's become second nature to improve it again on your display standard. So now you're faster and better. Well, let's paint another army. Well, now you start that entire process again, and round you go, and you're just going to keep getting better and better and better, you know, and it's as simple as that. But the main important thing is theme.
It comes
defined.
Back to that narrative thing that you were talking
Yeah,
about.
every time.
That was your initial attraction.
Yeah, it's always about theme. Yeah, for example, why affiliate with High Elves? Because of the stories. Why Eldar, even though they're kind of the same thing but in space, but again it's about who the Eldar are. That made me excited about it, you know. So just a model from some random company with no context doesn't excite me. You know, if I can't put, say, a dwarf bust in a dwarf hold in the old world, then I have no place for him. You know, so I have to apply that to that thing. So it really becomes about me and the story and how I relate to everything that we do. You know, but that's obviously how I look at the hobby. But that really fuels me through every project, because with enthusiasm, I don't need to motivate myself. It's already there.
Does that answer your question, Alex?
Yes, it does.
Hey!
Yeah. Next question. Can you recall your earliest eureka or penny drop moment? And we'll start with Lisa on that one.
Yeah, I think it's when I figured out glazing.
Glazing.
Because I was painting Lady Lindir from the Night Haunt, which is Games Workshop model.
Very intricate model.
Yeah, it's very. I ended up having to prop her up with a couple of cocktail skid sticks, because I think Night Haunt are quite notorious for being very bobbingy and bouncy. And yeah, it was on her dress because I was trying to recreate a satin effect, but inadvertently figured out glazing. So it was kind of like, yay, okay, I figured something out. And after that, it kind of like, that was a big turning point for me in my painting. So I think I've been painting about 9 months at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, really fully display.
Yeah, but when you were like seriously committed to it,
Yeah.
And that's something that you've integrated into your.
Yeah, because I mainly paint with glazes and layering. So
Yeah,
yeah,
brilliant. John?
Along similar lines, I was painting for many years, just standard painting with a brush, and I'd had lots of. I was very lucky because I started working at Games Workshop when I was very young, and I was lucky to be able to sit with really good painters, sitting with somebody like Dave Soper, for example, and having explain how he would paint a model without using any undercoat, just endless thin layers of paint. And to me that was like, wait a second, you have to undercoat your models, you know. I was like, you kind of have to spray them black or white or whatever, and he's like, no, none of that, just build it up over a very long period of time. I'm sitting there watching him paint Ariel, the the Wood Elf Queen of the Forest with those butterfly wings that he did. That was all very, very thin layers of paint over bare metal miniature. And we sort of sat there watching him do it. And then in Spain as well, with different Spanish painters, David Rodriguez was another example who's won multiple Slayer swords. And I took him around Spain with me, and we were showing people how to use a new paint range that Games Workshop had developed. So we were sitting in Games Workshop stores and do them painting, and actually sitting with him and watching him and talking to him about his process was really useful as well. So having contact with really top level painters, there's lots of stuff. I mean, I sat with Borja Garcia, who was in Valladolid with me, and he was saying, oh, why don't you mix some green with your red to do these deeper shades on the red? And I was thinking, well, that's crazy. And then actually when he did it, the luster of the green and the depth of the green and the red was much, much better. You know, it just improved. There were lots of, as you can paint for many years, I was always quite neat, quite methodical, quite a neat painter, like I said, with my free hands and making sure everything was neat and tidy. You can paint for many years and you can kind of plateau, and you're going along at that steady pace, and your models are great and you're happy with them, they look great, and you paint more of them and you get speedier and stuff. But every so often you have an interaction with something or somebody. Nowadays it's easier because we have the internet, the connectivity of the internet, and we can all follow each other on socials and watch YouTube videos and all the rest of it, and that's great. But I was lucky enough to actually have these people who I met going through the journey. Joe Hill was another one who was a really good friend of mine. We worked together in retail, and I sat with him, and he would say, oh, try this or try that, and you know, have you got any spare Space Marine bits? I want to do a Golden Demon entry. I'm like, yeah, come to my house and raid it. You know, so I raided the bins for it, and he ended up with like all this Space Marine stuff and created a Golden Demon entry out of it. So there's all these interactions with people who are better than you at painting stuff. So if you can hang around with people who inspire you, aspire you, whether that's socially, you know, physical sort of way, and you're lucky enough, or whether that's online, and you know, you're exposing yourself to the skills and the abilities of others. We have these mirror cells, you know. I go to Tommy's house and I just sit there and like look at his stuff, you know, and just try to absorb some of it through my fingertips, and you know. And then of course there's the questions about how do you do that, and you know, talking around it and stuff, and that's really, really handy. So I've had a few of those moments where I was plateauing, and then suddenly just had like another jump upwards in terms of miniature painting skill. Getting an airbrush as well was useful. I had no idea how to use an airbrush, and everyone was saying, oh, you need to have one of these. And I spoke to Pablo Lopez, and he's a guy from Madrid, and he said, you need to have one because there's some things you just can't do without it. And I was like, I can do anything without one, and I don't need one of those. And then I got one, and I painted a Charybdis, like a dark elf thing, with it, and it was just so much easier. And I was working with the blends and stuff. I was already pretty much good at it on my first day. And after that, it was like, well, just let's watch some videos, let's practice with it, let's get better at it and stuff like that. And that helped me to get a lot of the legwork done for sort of army painting to start with a really nice kind of transition on the miniature and then go into brushwork. So that was another leap forwards. So there was a few.
Yeah.
So I've been painting for a very long time. So, you know, it's just a process, and you go at a certain plateau and then you jump up.
So it's a big thing that permeated both what you said and Lisa said as well. I think it's a bit of a system shock when you initially start that process of I'm going to commit to painting something at a display level, is the amount of refinement that's involved.
Yeah.
Because I think, particularly having worked in commissions, a lot of people that don't really know expect you to produce something of that display quality in the same time it takes them to paint something of a quality that they're accustomed to, and they don't realise that actually you end up taking a lot longer on a model.
Yeah,
when you start that process.
You're right, but there's a moment where you have to stop and go, it's done now.
Yeah, definitely.
You just be eternally painting the same miniature and go, no, that's not good enough. And you just be eternally stuck in the same thing. So what Tommy said earlier about painting armies and painting a lot of stuff, well, that's really useful, because when you do that, you have to stop, because you kind of set yourself some deadlines of like, I'm going to paint 1,000 points, for example, or whatever you're doing, or a warband, or so you have a limit. You can't be on it forever. You need to progress. So I think with any artistic or creative process, whether it's miniature painting or doing oil painting or whatever it is, you need to, within yourself, reach a point where you say, well, that's done, that's good enough for me. You know, or it's good enough for the competition which I'm entering it in, or it's good enough for the cabinet display in which it needs to be a part of. Or
there's a reason that phrase, I'm calling it done, gets used so often by miniature painters, because we understand that there's a lot of elasticity within that done term.
Well, we've got a lot of bandwidth, haven't we? We could just go on forever. Refining it, and
Tommy, your first penny drop moment?
Watching that heavy metal painter paint.
The one that you alluded to earlier?
Yeah. Do you know what? Again, I could actually pull a couple like John. So I'll pull one outside. Before the heavy metal painter guy, I was painting like Tamiya models. Understanding that a brush has a point on it, and that point gets shitter the more I press a brush. Yeah. So if you're painting things like details and eyes and you're pushing hard, everyone laughs and goes, yeah, that's obvious, but why do people then push hard? If everyone here can answer that question. So that to me was a penny drop moment, like, right, okay, that's how a brush works. So if I treat the brush like that from the word go, then...
the brush discipline.
Yeah, no, and it seems like I'm going, I'm this 13-year-old master now, but it's not. It's just like it was an obvious thing that just seemed normal.
Yeah.
So understanding that I had the power to spot details, and they were just there because they were normal. Mm-hmm. They weren't special or anything like that, if that makes sense. And then the big penny drop moment was watching Tim Proud paint a Chaos Warrior from start to finish, in a day. And I literally sat, this close to him. Him and Nigel Stillman were painting. So I got to watch Nigel show me how exactly not to do it. And, like, genuinely, I can still remember it in my head. It was just a blob of metallic paints, because metallic paints were just released by Games Workshop at the time. So you could even probably put a date on how long I've been doing this just with that information. In fact, that was a Heavy Metal Roadshow in a store. Oh. So it does have a date. It literally does have a date. It'll be in a White Dwarf somewhere. So, watching Tim Proud, the way you use a palette, the way you use a brush on the palette, and the way you use a brush on the model, although I hadn't acknowledged them into them categories, I acknowledged it more about what's happening on the model, which is what everybody does, thinks painting happens on the subject.
Sure,
but watching all that work, whether it be through blending on the sword, through doing the rib cage on the models, or the sweep of the cloak, I got to see how all that works, start to finish. I bought that model, I bought them paints, I bought that brush, went home, copied it from memory, copied as best I could, and it was just up from there, because...
It's such a big thing, isn't it, and John alluded to this as well, is being able to see how someone who's better than you does the thing. I think especially where it's so easy to overlook, especially in the day and age of YouTube and social media, because the fact of the matter is, when you're watching a video, you're generally seeing a top-down view where you see a bit of a hand and the brush, and then some of the model that they're painting, but there's so much more that happens, and this is something you're big on, is posture and
absolutely,
and things like that.
So here's the thing. Now, I think it's both simultaneously harder to learn miniature painting and easier to learn miniature painting now. Because if you're a clever person and you understand, like I did as a kid, not that I'm saying I was all clever and all that, but, like if you're a person that can observe details just as if, there's a detail and there it is, that's just how it works. If you're naturally that kind of person, you'll watch all these videos on the internet and you will get good at painting, because you'll see those subtleties there plain as day. Mm-hmm. If you're not that type of person, and most people don't know they're not that type of person, then you'll go down the dogma route. I need to learn feathering, I need to learn this, I need to learn that. But actually, these are just terms that hide the simplicity of painting, So, I need to learn blending, I need to learn OSL, freehand, it's got to be this, that, or the other. It's all jargon-based or product-based for those that rely on jargon and product. But Tim Proud didn't talk to me. I watched. So did Tim Proud teach me? Or Did I have the ability to observe just the facts of what's happening? Go, there's a fact of what's happening. Let's do that fact. You know, so that's a big key element is really realizing how good you are as a human being. Do you know what I mean? And using that as a springboard forwards. I can't actually remember the point of the question, but come on, where were we at?
It was we originally started on penny drop moment.
Yeah.
And we moved on to talking about observing people that are better.
Oh, right, yeah. So
that is, and it is.
So that is exactly it. Yeah.
And it, whether or not they know that, I believe that they are teaching you. And I would encourage everyone here to be a bit wary of the self-taught phrase, because I don't think that self-taught is really a thing, just as there's no such thing as a self-made man. And I think you have to ask yourself why someone like that would want you to believe that they're self-taught. Usually there's a little bit of deception going on there, even if it's to themselves.
That's an interesting... go on, you're about to say that.
No, I was just going to say, my other key thing that kind of helped me in my journey is taking, obviously it's not going to be something everyone wants to do, but I took a deep dive in colour theory.
Yeah.
And that's really helped me kind of understand how colours interact.
Reading the literature and things like that. Yeah,
it's and sort of like studying a lot of people who do like portrait painting and 2D art. It's very transferable. Yeah. But yeah, that kind of, because obviously all colours interact with their atmospheres, and if you're trying to think, well, where is this, this bust, where is this person? Really taking a deep dive into colour theory.
I did a similar thing when I decided that I really wanted to get better at skin tones. Was I bought a couple of books on fine art portraiture. Yeah. Because as much as fine art portraiture, the thing is going on to generally a big canvas, and we're painting a tiny little head, the principles are fundamentally the same. Yeah. And the art books are a great resource if you're wanting to develop your craft. That's a great point, Lisa.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of the old master techniques, like Caravaggio, I can't remember off the top of my head at the moment, but any underpaintings, because when you do an underpainting, depending on what colours you use, everything will be pulled through to the top layers that you paint over the top of the underpainting, and will have an effect on the final piece. Learning the old master techniques is really helpful as well. So that helped me do a lot. I tend to experiment a lot with what I do, because that's a drive and it's fun for me. That's helped me move forward. So.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm going to do one more of my own questions, and then, because you three are just so bursting with knowledge that you've taken up a...
I'm holding myself back, man.
Yeah, I know you are. I do appreciate it. So you're very, very generous of you. But so I'll do one more of mine, and then we'll go on to some... I've got some pre-submitted questions, and then we'll get some from our live audience. But when we go to do the questions, I would just remind you that this has been recorded. So if you don't want your voice to be on the recording, then I'm sorry, but you'll need to maybe hold on to your question till after. But
whisper it to me.
Yeah. So, what would you say the biggest change that you've observed to the hobby has been since you started? And we'll start with Tommy on that one.
Keeping it strictly painting. Attitudes.
Attitudes?
Yeah.
Okay, so in what way have attitudes shifted?
So, well, before the world of the internet, you had less things like commission painters and competition winning being at the front of what we love. And that, in some people's world, hurts what they love, and they don't know it.
But leaning too much into the competitive nature?
Well, so like, for example, some people think they shouldn't be painting if they're not of a display standard. You see that a lot. Exactly. Yeah. But we hear a lot more about that now than I ever used to Well, I say we, I'll use that word. So yeah, I think attitudes, because this
like people feeling that they're unworthy because they don't meet a certain standards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or they don't enjoy the hobby they blatantly want to enjoy because they're not hitting a certain standard, when the best way to get to the standard you want to hit is to enjoy it. Because if you enjoy it, you'll paint more. You paint more, you'll get better at it. You get better at it, you'll enjoy it. So you'll paint more and off you go. But the moment you go like that, oh, I want to paint this more, but it's no good, is it? Wow. Do you see what I mean?
Start
Like
punishing yourself.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And why do we do that to ourselves? Like, it's an interesting question, and one I had to delve into.
A lot of it's the comparison culture of social media, right?
Oh, that's it. So I'm funny with the word comparison at the moment, because I actually believe you absolutely should be comparing yourself to others, just not hitting yourself with it. For example, Tim Proud did this, and I was doing this. Or, right, I'll do it like that. So I've just compared myself.
Sure, but yeah, I guess what I mean by specifically that comparison culture phrase, which I know is a little bit buzzwordy, but
yeah,
it's the negative comparisons that we all draw on social media, right?
Judgmental.
Yeah.
Judgmental.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Whereas assessment based.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a completely different thing, because we try to work out how somebody's cogs work. Well, cogs work without opinion and without emotional content. So if we can assess how cogs work, we can go, right, well, let's make my cogs work that way. Mm-hmm. And that's a completely dispassionate way of doing things. And because we're organic and we're going to get it wrong and it's going to take time and practice, we can start to apply that compassion to the way we deal with our own failures, or as I'd rather call them, learning experiences, because they are.
Yeah.
So as a commission painter and as a display standard painter, as a box art painter, blah, 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 I went through this. I've had to relearn how to, one for a better term, paint shit. Just dry brush, base coat, wash in army, and enjoy it and absolutely love it now. And it took me time to release those professional chains of the perception how I thought people would expect me to be on the internet, and on and on and on, because there's a lot of that. And at the end of the day here's a kid, still, in an adult body, maybe, that just wants to paint some effing soldiers and show other people how simple it can be, regardless of how impressive it might look, and how enjoyable it can be. And that's just it. That's it. And so I think, to me, I saw lots of people enjoying the hobby when I was younger, and I was immersed in that. And now I'm immersed in a place where there's more professional obligation, more standard obligation, more flagellation, more. Whereas we are allowed just to enjoy our hobby, whether you're earning money from it or you just sat at home enjoying yourself, because that's what the hobby is for. And that really is that's mad important to me, because I've had to live that journey. Yeah. Because being a professional kind of broke me, whereas now I'm a different kind of professional. It's why I sit here and just have a laugh with it.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah.
John, what's the biggest change you've observed since you started?
Well, I started in 1985, so I've seen a lot of changes in my almost 50 years of life.
So what would you say was the single biggest one?
The advent of the internet and making everything kind of, I come from a remote place down in the southwest of Cornwall. There was nothing going on there really. There was nobody around. So when I moved away to study at university, I was more in touch with people, the big city, And now being in Spain has been useful for me as well, because I used to travel around the whole country, so I could talk to a lot of the Spanish painters, which was always really good. So that harks back to what I said earlier. But things have changed a lot. Technology has advanced in terms of internet and the way that we connect with each other. But also product has advanced. I was thinking about it, trying to listen to Tommy and also trying to think about what changes I've experienced in my time. But actually, you could argue that the quality of the material has improved and you've got lots of better paints and better brushes and better gimmicky things, but then I stopped myself and I thought, well, no, actually, I remember those original Games Workshop sort of paints. Those are really good. There's nothing wrong with them. You know, the original Goblin Green and Blood Red. I've still got some, and they still work. You know, so has the technology really improved that much? Or, you know, if you're a good workman, then you should be able to work with all the tools you've got around you, right? You should be able to apply your skills to using this style of brush or this style of brush. Now, I will say my painting did improve when I started to use better brushes. A good brush is definitely a valuable tool. Try to keep mine separate because I've got two daughters. The younger one, 17-year-old, is really mad into painting and stuff, and every time she comes to visit me, she paints something with watercolours, and I have to check that she's not using my really expensive brushes to do it, because she's just come in and help herself to a brush that she sees. I'm like, oh, it just cost me however much it cost me. But yeah, I'm using better brushes. I'm using what I would consider to be a range of different companies' paints and things, and trying out different things, always trying different things. And I've seen that a lot of those changes, but rolling it right back to those original paints, there was nothing wrong with them. You know, maybe my brushes were a bit bent out of shape when I was a kid. You know, that now they're in perfect condition. You know, and I buy new ones when they get racked out. But in terms of those changes, I think there is an advance in materials. Everybody's certainly jumped onto bandwagons, and there's lots of gimmicks. Tommy's favourite, the wet palette.
It's not a gimmick. Oh yeah, no, get me going. We'll talk about that if you want.
But you know, there's loads of stuff going on. It's certainly become bigger and more widespread. Loads more people know about it. I remember being young and doing Games Workshop stuff or painting miniatures, and nobody really knew about it out there. And they kind of just asked the question, well, what is it he's doing? You know, what's that? Is it something wrong with him? You know, and now it's like a much more widespread and known thing, and you know, it's much more acceptable. And people visit my house and go, "Oh, you do Warhammer?" And you go, "Yeah, you know about that?" You know, and that's really cool. You know, so yeah, I've seen big changes through different ranges, and the advent of plastic injection molding, and the change from metal stuff to really highly detailed plastic stuff. And there's something to be said about those older, more simple casts, those older kind of one-piece miniatures. You know, you have your dwarf troll slayer with his axe in each hand, and he's kind of flat, but it's something quite enjoyable about picking one of them up and just painting it in a couple of evenings. And you know, I just finished a Night Goblin that was more or less very simple. It was a Brian Nelson sculpt, but it was very nice, but it was simple to paint. It wasn't like a super convoluted kit that had like 1 million parts spread over 5 frames. It wasn't like that. It was a really simple process, and I enjoyed that a lot. And I do enjoy the more complicated kits as well, and I understand why they've become more complicated. But going back to what Tommy was saying about having this, you know, maybe he wasn't talking about comparison as much as like when you're looking at things and you get upset with yourself because you don't hit a sort of perceived level of where you should be. You know, where should you be? Well, you should be where you are, doing what you're doing, enjoying what you're doing now.
Yeah, man.
I think that, yeah, you could look at the new Usharan vampire miniature, which is like a massively detailed, cool sculpt over many frames, with lots of levels of detail in it. As a more novice painter, that's quite daunting, and you're not going to come up with a very good result compared to what a top-end painter would. So you can see where you've got a gap between where you want to be and where you are, and you might fall into that gap into like a deep depression about it and go, I just spent €100 on something that doesn't look great, you know, and that's maybe you become a victim of increased technology and better miniature making and all of that. You know, those older sculpts are really cool to paint something simple. So maybe we should be as a simple painters, painting simple things, and then increasing our level of complexity as we get better at doing it. You know, not jump in with, you know, Venerable Lord Croak as your second miniature. You know, there should be somebody recommending that you probably need a bit of practice before you try something like that if you want to achieve this kind of effect. You know, I would always certainly give that kind of counsel to anybody who was setting up first with their miniatures, and make sure they had some simple enough miniatures to get a good result from, and that would motivate them to then get something a bit more complicated. Sort of like a phased approach.
I think even when you're an experienced painter, some of those really complicated detail kits can be frustrating because it's difficult to put your own stamp on it. Sometimes you do just feel like you're colouring in someone else's work, and I think it's why the likes of Lucas Penishay's Spear Mirabilis sculpts have become so popular, because they've been designed with painting in mind, because he'll suggest a little bit of fur texture, but there's lots of those big empty spaces for you to do your own thing on it. And you know, just like what you're saying about some of those old metal casts, you had the similar thing, didn't you, where you can really put your own stamp on them in a way that it is a bit more difficult to do with the big sort of half dragon vampire lord thing that they recently brought out.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that's more or less where I was going. So
Sorry.
Thanks for helping me get there. That's good. I needed that, I think.
Lisa, what's the biggest change you've observed?
I think probably coming from, back in early new millennium, and then jumping back in 5.5 years ago. I remember walking into a Warhammer shop and being horrified that everything was plastic, because the plastic used to be horrible, and I was kind of like, everything's plastic, why is it all plastic, where's the metal miniatures gone? But obviously realised it's really good plastic now. It's far superior to what it used to be, and then realising, as I mentioned before, sort of you said with the technology, 3D printing is a thing. And that's year on year just keeps improving. I mean, again, going back to like the detail on things, sometimes you do find some sculptors do far too much detail. You've got texture on cloth, and it's like you look at some of them, and you just think that's going to murder my paintbrushes. But sometimes some of them, like Lucas.
And those 3D prints, some of them can be really bad for that.
They can,
excessively detailed.
Yeah, but it's interesting because I think someone spoke to someone who does do 3D sculpting, and he said he does it because he likes doing it, which fair enough.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of them sound like a lot of people who do 3D printing. They just want to print stuff, give it a wash and a dry brush, and they just want something in the display cabinet. They don't tend to cater as much to display painters who, but I think they are getting better because people obviously have moaned at them. But I think that's quite a big, significant technological kind of thing. Yeah. And I think following on from what Tommy said earlier about people comparing themselves, I think it's always good to compare yourself to sort of like, okay, how did I now do this or something? But then people need to understand you're all on your own journey. Because I always do a comparison with myself every few years just to sort of see how far I've come. Just to sort of like give yourself a little bit. I'm doing okay.
And with along those lines with the comparison thing, I think a big thing is, at the risk of sounding a little bit wishy-washy, is learning to be a bit kinder to yourself. Because I think particularly if you've got one of those weird creative brains, we're a lot nastier to ourselves than we are to other people.
Yeah, imposter syndrome's fun.
Yes it is.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I simultaneously sit here gobby yet squirm at the same time.
Pontificating and then and we're like, what am I doing here? So I think we'll do some audience questions. So I've got some pre-submitted ones. I've been asked to ask this, so I do apologise. But Guy Incognito asks...
is his name Guy?
That's what he put. Who is your favourite Tabletop Scotland team member, and why is it Simon?
And why is it Simon?
So none of you know Simon, so I'll answer this because he is going to listen to the recording. He told me. So my favourite Tabletop Scotland team member is Simon because he is always happy to see me, and I'm not sure the same can be said of all of them.
Right, wow. Is Simon the fella I've been emailing?
No, that's
no.
Dave.
All right, okay, yeah. The easy mistake to make.
Yeah.
Because I've seen neither of them.
Yeah.
No, they're
Yeah.
just.
Anyway,
we all forget names, don't we?
so-
But never faces.
Yeah. Obligatory silly question out the way. So this is anonymous. What is one step in the painting process that you don't look forward to? And they've cheated a wee bit because there's actually a second question in here, and they said, also, what's your favourite? Do you want to have a go at that one, Lisa? So what step in the painting process do you not look forward to, and what is your favourite? I guess like generally, because the process can always be a bit different.
It depends. 'Cause sometimes I like cleaning and building stuff, but I had a 3D printed Chinese dragon. I put together a few, I think last year sometime, but because it's quite a big model, it's about 20 centimetres high, and it was in 12 different segments, and that was an absolute monster to build, because I had to pin and drill 3 different points on each part of, because it's basically like a long snake.
Yeah.
It's a Chinese dragon. I had to pin and drill every single segment to connect it together. And some bits hadn't cured inside of the segment, so
lovely.
I got resin leaking out, which was actually quite useful because I could use a UV light to cure it to actually
you got
harden
some
around
free dermatitis with that model.
Yeah, great. As I said, sometimes building include it depends on the model, I think, as well.
It's
like
relative,
some Games Workshop ones I hate trying to build because it's they're just painful.
Yeah.
Because they're just so fiddly. My favourite part.
Yeah, what was something you always look forward to, I guess?
I don't know really. I just.
It is all relative, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just. I think just as long as I can get into the zone of actually, painting a model.
Yeah.
I think just start to finish really. I just enjoy the whole process.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Cool. What I'll do is we'll do a question each rather than because I'm a bit conscious of time. So I'll do. So we've got another one. This is from Derek. He says, I go through a period of time when I will spend time focusing on a specific painting technique. He says, e.g. contrasts, light placement, skin tones. Do you do this? And he's also cheated and asked 2 questions. If so, are you working on anything in particular at the moment? John.
Hi, Derek, wherever he is. Thanks for your questions. Hi. I am doing something like that at the moment, and I do that. So I do the same as you. So with every project I do, I try to advance a bit more. So if I'm looking at an army project, for example, I think, okay, in this project, I would kind of like them to be on lava basis. So that means I'm going to need to work on some OSL, which that means I'm going to need to think about how light placement works coming from underneath and upwards. So that's practice, and that's okay. So I recently decided to do a glow-up version of an army I painted in 1997, which I sold many years ago. It's my Chaos Space Marine Night Lords army, which was published. It was in the Chaos Collector's Guide, and it was quite a popular army. And I was very sad that I'd sold it, and I no longer own it. So with the new version, I'm using new plastics and new miniatures, and I've copied all of the old ones into a new form. So I've gone by miniature through the Chaos Collector's Guide and actually copied each miniature as best as I could with new parts and some mixtures with some old parts, so they look like they used to look, only much more ferocious looking, larger and more dangerous looking. But in this army I've decided that I wanted some weapon effects, so I got some 3D printed parts, I got some muzzle flares, and I got some plasma bolts, and that was something I hadn't really worked on very much in the past. I had done sort of some glowing effects with wizards casting spells, or bottles of wine with wine in them, or little flasks of magical potions glowing around the miniature. So I had tried and experimented with a few things, so I kind of had worked with glazing and looking at those things. But with this project, more or less every model's got some kind of gun flash effect, some kind of plasma effect and some kind of magic. And I also decided in that army as well, I wanted the power weapons all to be kind of active. So I was using very fine fuse wire to like make electrical bolts all around them. And I was looking online for some good inspiration. There's a Spanish painter called El Miniaturista, and he's got some really good sort of light effects, and also these arcing lightning bolts connecting like Necron weapons to the ground, and where the electricity was sparking off. And I did that, and with good effect, and I was really pleased. So again, looking at the Night Lord's Chaos Lord that I made, copying my old one but making it a glow-up version, and then adding these new effects and having some things, that was a step forwards for me, and that was a way of using a project like that to then incorporate a new skill, learn a new skill, practice it over and over again, but within that project. And with the Orc and Goblin projects I'm doing at the moment, I'm adding different things like little snotlings on the bases and things like that. So it's like using some cute stuff to offset the savagery of the heroes. So yeah, I do that, and I'm glad that you asked me questions. So thank you.
Just for John and the people that are listening at home, that Tommy gave a little nod of agreement there. That was the little
That was the giggle.
Yeah, that was that.
Yeah.
He wasn't undermining you. It was
No. Well, no. It's the example I gave to Alex. It's the example I gave to Alex before. You use the army project based on theme and excitement to practice a skill at a bottom level and just refine it up to the top level. Bam, and it's banked.
Yeah, two heads talking me.
Yeah,
that's it.
Perfect.
On the same page.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we'll throw it out to the audience here. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to put to... Okay, I think, gentleman over there, you were first.
Yeah, just the model's getting more detailed and more textured. How do you decide which details you want to pop out when you're painting?
Sure. So the audience member asked there, how do you decide which details you're going to prioritise in a model, particularly as they become more detailed? We'll go with Tommy for that one.
Well, when it comes to more busy models, the first decision I'll make is what details do I want to remove. Because if it's a pain in the arse and I don't want to paint it, then it's coming off. But the thing is like, do I want the model to dictate what I have to paint, how I have to paint it, how I should look, or do I want to dictate that to the model? Yeah. So as a painter, I know which I want to do. Oh, do you know what, actually? It depends on what I want to work on at the time, because both are a different skill set and blah 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 blah. But let's take cloth for example. I've got some of the Dark Crystal and Labyrinth models on that I want to start work on. Some of those have got a bunch of cloth texture that I don't want to paint. I don't want to paint it, but I want to paint it. Do you see what I mean? I want to paint the cloth effect. I don't want the cloth effect necessarily dictated to me. So I'll decide what one's removing and what one's adding. I just recently painted a freehand banner on some skeletons, and the banner is easily the best bit on it, but the first thing I did to that banner was remove all the bat wings and skulls and decor, because I just want a chuffing flag. I just want a flag to paint. It doesn't need all its paraphernalia at all. So that's the first thing, is remove it. The next thing is, and this actually ties into something we were mentioning earlier on about how complex things can become overwhelming, regardless of whether you're a really good painter or a not so really good painter. And you have a little moment of cultivated clarity in that, just that knowledge that regardless of how complex a piece is or isn't, all you can do is one brushstroke at a time, and that's not my opinion. All right, so all you need to do is isolate which brushstroke are you going to paint now, and make it a good one. So that's it. So if I'm looking at, say, a bunch of texture I don't want to paint, a bunch of strands on fabric. I'm using an arm as an example, as if I'm imagining somewhat over my arm. Right. So let's say you've got all these things sculpted on there. Well, they're going to be sculpted in a series of individual shapes. Well, each individual shape is an individual brushstroke. Just take it a brushstroke at a time. Calm yourself down and isolate them brushstrokes. What brushstroke is going to be best? Is the object you're painting long and slim? Is it long and slim and broken? In which case, there's your brushstroke. or multiple brushstrokes, if you will. You see what I mean? And you just start to just reduce everything in and around you to the simplest possible thing you could do, which is what painting is. You know, and then the illusion when all that comes together is this fantastic firework display, because that's how it works. And all our job really is, in the mechanical sense, is to isolate size, shape, colour and location, and that all comes down to one thing. So how do I decide? Depends on my objectives. If I don't want it, I'll remove it. If I do want to paint it, and it's whatever it is, I reduce it down with simple components, regardless size, shape, colour, location, and off I go.
Happy? Yeah.
Thank you.
I think there was someone else asked a question or put a hand up. Yes.
It's kind of perceived these days that the best miniature painters are the ones who can get the smoothest blends, look the most golden demon-like. No offence to you. Do you think that is holding miniature painting back, and people like Craftwork Studio are doing something truly creative? People don't do that because they're like, oh, I've got to get amazing blends all the time. That's all it's about.
Okay, so the gentleman asked, do we feel that the need to have everything perfectly smooth, do we feel that that's holding the craft back, especially when you, in light of seeing the likes of Craftworld Studio, where they have a very specific and painterly style? Lisa, do you want to tackle that one?
It really depends whereabouts you are in the world. Basically, because if you go to painting competitions like SMC, you won't see a lot of it. It's more creativity, it's more, although it tends to be like the GW and Golden Demon style of things, and that's obviously what they want. You won't, places like Monty, SMC, you won't see very much of it at all. So, and there are some people, who are winning sort of like best in show, who are more sketchily and more artistic with their ways. They're just very, very good at doing what they're doing. But yeah, it's slowly coming away from it. I mean, obviously, it's been something that's hung over the UK for quite some time, because obviously, we've had GW for 40 odd years. But yeah, when you go to like the European circuit and the competitions, it is a lot less there. They tend to have more the resin busts, the more larger scale models, and yeah, there's much more variety over that side of things. So, which is great, because it means that people who want to be more artsy with their work can still do well in competitions. So.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Chap at the back there.
I always find fascinating the kind of breadth between people's process for visualizing, because some people are able to see full images, some people, like myself, I can't visualize a finished product, so I kind of work by the steps and hope it goes well. So this is a question to all four of you, like, whereabouts on that spectrum do you sit, and how does that inform your process?
So the gentleman asks, he says that he struggles with visualization himself, and likes to follow more of a step-by-step process. Would that be fair? Yeah. How does visualization work within your process, and how does that inform your art, and how do you do that? Do you want to start that, John?
Yeah, sure. Personally, I'm very observant, and I take in details quite quickly. Especially, I'm informing myself all the time about the shades in this gentleman's red T-shirt, for example. How it's almost black and almost orange, but it's red. Yeah, and looking at those things. Sorry to pick on you. You're right in front of me right now. Take a walk out in nature and just see how a spider web looks in the morning, which we saw this morning with like some dew on it and that kind of shininess, and maybe that gives me some ideas for painting goblin spider riders, you know, those things, and try to commit them to memory. So I'm quite good at picking up on details, especially around nature, which is why I like to do animals or drawings of animals or painting of steeds or animals, things like this, and freehand, which we were mentioning earlier. But in terms of like a project, I would definitely sit down and think about how I'd like my army to look overall, or a squad or a unit or a miniature for a competition. And then I like also to make a start on it and then see how it goes, to see how it develops as I'm painting it as well, because I might make some decisions and change my mind. I normally do a test miniature. If I'm going to do an army project, for example, I'll paint one and I'll sit there for an evening painting it, and I might change the metals on it a couple of times, or I might, you know, change the way I'm doing some blending on it, so just to get a good feeling of how I'm going to then reproduce that over and over again for across a whole army. The Night Lords is an example. I painted up one miniature. The gold on it was quite a bright gold, so they looked more like Thousand Suns than Night Lords. So then I went back and changed it to a kind of more archaic verdigris style gold, and it was more silvery in the end, and that worked much better. But you know, instead of reproducing the mistake across 100 miniatures, I got it down to just one, so that helps as well. I don't know if that answers your question, but I certainly have a similar kind of thing going on, you know, with being able to see details and then be able to have like a conceptual idea of colours and things, and finish stuff in my head. I can hold that and then paint an army up to that level, definitely. But also there's a lot of joy to be had from just getting something, not really having a clear idea about where it's going to go, and just going with it. So I kind of fall into both camps really. I'm not sure, like I said, I'm not sure whether that answers a question or whether it opens another one.
Opens another one for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I go? Can I ask you a question? So if you were to follow John's example of, you want to paint an army, and you're going to do one model first, which by that kind of model I said earlier on is your display standard. Even if you want to keep it low because it's one single model, you're going to put lots of thought and effort into, then you're going to apply that to an army. How intimate will you know that colour scheme? Will you know that process? And how embedded in your mind will it be?
I can't say anything. So there's no visual. If I close my eyes and try to imagine that, there's nothing.
Okay, that's interesting.
Can see the full picture. So she goes, right, let's go through the colors, visualizes it incredibly clearly, and I've seen her like sit down and put something together and go like, this is exactly how I imagined it, and this is how I make it.
What's your favourite movie?
My favorite movie?
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings?
Who's your favourite character?
So he said Lord of the Rings. Just for the
What's your favourite character?
Let's go with Aragorn.
Yeah. You describe Aragorn, couldn't you? Yeah.
I can use I know the text, but if I try to imagine him, I can't see an image as much.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lady in the audience has just said that this is a neurological condition.
She whips her PhD out.
But you've heard of this, and it's sometimes called aphantasia, and it's an inability to visualise things in your mind.
But the thing is, it's on a spectrum, so people can see full images, people can see fake images, and I always found it really interesting how we have kind of the same advice going across when people have such a difference in how they can kind of see what they want to do.
So the gentleman
I
at
have a
the back
response.
has said that this aphantasia, it's on a spectrum. It's not necessarily that you try to see things in your mind's eye and it's just black. Sometimes you can see little bits of images. You know, some people it's more severe than others.
Do you use any reference material?
Now, yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I use Pinterest quite a lot, and it's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I actually wanted to say that about mood boarding in general.
I mean, because Pinterest also has a lot of the, it'll have a picture with all the colours down the side. It's like a colour picker sort of thing, but they're fantastic if you want to try and pick a scheme or something. They've got hundreds on there. I don't even want to try and admit how many pins I've got on Pinterest, but it's a really, really useful tool, because I mean, especially with like AI art coming in, I know sort of like it's a bit of a taboo, but if you use it as a tool, it can be quite helpful, because if you're imagining something, okay, I've got this elf archer or something, and then you type in elf archer's male archer or something, it will give you loads of images, and it could be something that you can then use as a put it on your computer or print it out, and then you've got that visual in front of you, how you then want to translate it into your meat, so that might be quite helpful. So
I would just like to quickly say as well, as one of those weirdos that does visualise a lot of things in my head quite clearly, that it's not always perfect, even if you're able to do it, and as much as a lot of the time when I do want to paint something, I have a very clear idea of how I want it to look. Sometimes I will try the thing in my head, and then when I see I've got it out in front of me, it doesn't quite work, and I'll fine tune it. Sometimes I'll bin it and just go in another direction. Sometimes, like Lisa's saying, I'll use the mood board if I'm not sure. So I wouldn't be discouraged if it's not something you can do, or if it's something you struggle to do, because it doesn't disqualify you from being creative.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No,
Yeah.
it just changes the way that you approach it.
Sure. Yeah. You maybe need to take a different process. You maybe can't jump right in, and that's fine. But like I've said, even if you are able to visualise things, I'm sure your wife will say the same thing. Just because you can visualise things well doesn't mean that everything you visualise well is a good idea.
Hell yeah! Can I add a bit more? Is that okay?
Yeah, go.
Yeah. So now we've got a bit more detail about you and what you're going through, and some more detail from these guys. To use a simple word, copy, and like Ben was saying, a mood board. If you're surrounded by things that are themed around, whether it be colour, shape, theme, while you're doing your project, you have things to draw from consistently, whether that be Pinterest or whether it be an army book for whatever game it is you play. You're constantly there drawing from these things. The more you draw from these things, and I don't know how this may or may not relate to your state of affairs, but I'd expect somebody to start learning what I call the rules of engagement. And they would start, like with language, for example. You've learned a language, you remember a language, and you use that language in ways that could be offensive or inoffensive, appropriate or inappropriate, and you use it deliberately within them situations. Art's the same. It just uses colour and not words, So when you're surrounded by this idea of it's actually okay to copy, because you will copy and use all those things you're copying in your own way, and you'll produce those things with your own results, and if you're enjoying it, then you're doing it right. The next thing is should you then decide just to let go? Well, it's okay to let go and just try some things. Just go, and if you decide that something doesn't fit right, then ask yourself, what's the fact around that thing that doesn't fit? And obviously this applies to everybody, really, or all this applies to everybody. What's the fact? For example, we could sit there and go, don't like that shit. Yeah, no, I'm not doing that. Or you could go, I don't like that. Why don't I like that? This bit's too light. I'll darken it. This bit's too dark. I'll lighten it. This bit's too small. I'll largen it. This bit is too large. I'll smallen it. Do you see what I mean? And everything can move in just this very binary way, almost all the time. So you're free to do what you want. You're free to copy. Binary. Some is what it is. If you judge it and just slack it off, then your game's done. But if you quantify it and do the opposite, preferably sneak up on the opposite instead of just go, now it's too small, which it probably will do as well. You're going to be pendulum all the time. But, you're free in the moment, So, yeah, if you can't visualise, you can't visualise. And I don't think all of us can all the time, can we? We can't. I don't.
Everything. Some things I can sort of say,
yeah.
sort of like I want to do that. But can I just add one to you? The other thing that's really useful is doing master copies. Because a lot of 2D artists will do it. They'll, take Monet or something and they'll copy it to see, follow their brushstrokes and everything else like that. And you can do the same with 2D miniatures.
Yeah, man.
Are you quite big on that, Tommy? Like
Big time.
copying
Yeah,
styles?
yeah. I mean, like, how else are you going to learn?
Yeah.
Nobody here had created their own language now, did they?
No.
Just to be original.
No.
We don't do it as artists, even. And I think most of the people who try to be original and avoid copying, I don't know if they're that tasteful, because kind of taste is quantifiable in many ways, which is why things like colour theory exist.
Yeah.
You know, it's quantifiable.
Your creativity feeds itself, because the more you keep doing stuff, it's kind of like you'll start sort of thinking, oh, I can do this and I can try that with this, and you'll start getting all these ideas, and your own creativity will just feed itself.
Yeah.
It's not a finite thing, is it? It's,
No.
You only get so much, and that's your allocation, and you're done, and then you're doomed to creating bankruptcy for the
Yeah,
rest
you
of
know.
your life. It's the more you do it, the more you get of it. It's a bit like love.
Like every one of us in here could choose one painter who's painted an ultramarine, and we could all go away and copy that one painter and paint our own ultramarine. We'll all come out with different ultramarines. So you're all individual as default. How many people in here have got Scottish accents? Yeah, I bet your mum could pick you out of a room blindfolded based on your voice. So have you copied or are you original? I think you're original by default, based on all the shit you copy. Copy away. Copy away. Go for it. Don't be scared. Oh, I won't be seen as an individual. Yeah, you will. Absolutely. That's all I've done most of my life.
I think it also comes in the fact when people ask, I can't find my style, but it's kind of like that.
You got one, haven't you?
Well, yeah, it will come out eventually.
Yeah,
the more you do.
just be patient.
Yeah.
I mean, just as you couldn't see your own, or a person couldn't see their own style, doesn't mean you ain't got one. Because other people will go, oh, I recognise that guy because of the way he does this. It's like, you don't decide your
That
style.
happened with me.
Yeah, you don't
because-
decide it.
Because you're kind of blind to your own style as well, because
Yeah.
it's just you.
Like,
It's
I don't
just
have a
expressing
Mancunian
yourself.
accent.
But
I don't.
But I've had that where quite a few people have said that they've immediately recognised something that I've painted.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, I've had that because I paint a lot of pastels.
Yeah.
So, people tend to know my stuff because it's usually quite pretty.
Yeah. Whimsical. Yeah.
Whimsical. Yeah.
That was a really good question. Thank you.
Yes.
Great question.
Yeah.
I am conscious of time, and we do have the film screening to show. So I think we'll leave it there, unless someone is absolutely desperate to ask a question. Everyone happy? Yeah? Good? Do you have a question? No? No? Okay. Yeah. Give it up for our 3 panellists. They've come a long way.
Yay. Mate, cheers. Bosh.
And thank you all. This room is uncomfortably warm, so appreciate
Holy shit.
Yeah, appreciate your patience. So there is going to be a screening of the art in miniature now. I understand some of you maybe you need to go places. We did start a wee bit late, so if you want to stay and watch it, feel free. If you need to go, don't feel embarrassed if you need to. But thank you all for coming. The panel will be released as a recording at some point. I don't know when, but if you just keep an eye on the Tabletop Scotland socials, you'll be able to listen back to it because there's a wealth of information you got tonight. So thank you all very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I say thank you to you?
Oh, yeah, you can.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah? I enjoyed it a lot. It was top. Yeah, it was top. I'm going to go and get a drink.
Yeah.
I'm frazzled. Mate, thank you.
No, thank you.
Mate, great. Top time.